What up, Wizards? It's Dev and the Chicken. We're from Mtg. We like it a magic, and kind of a sad one today because we're going to talk about 10 cards that could have been contenders. They didn't eat lightning, but they did, in fact, crap thunder. Let's look at 10 cards that are rotating soon and really could have been good.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Now, you might be thinking to yourself that we're doing these rotation videos a little bit before they're relevant, but I'm actually trying to do them before they're irrelevant, because I think we're probably going to get another one of those Magic 2023 like post-rotation formats on MTG Arena really soon. I hope we get it. It's a fun format. I love to experiment in that environment. It's really exciting. But if we do get that, pretty sure a lot of people are going to be focused on that rather than the actual rotation. So I want to go ahead and get these videos out. Rotation's on my mind and the mind of a lot of you right now. So I think it's relevant to talk about these at the moment, and they give me a chance to recommend rotation videos to people around rotation in like end cards and such. See, I'm a YouTuber. And on that note, as a YouTuber, sometimes you have to try new things in your videos. You got to keep it fresh. And the way we're going to do that this time is by getting on with it as much as possible. I noticed during editing that I have a hard time with that, and I don't know how far we are into this video already, but we're going to get to the list soon. I've just got one more thing that I need to talk about before we get to it, and that's what cards even go on this list to begin with. This is actually the hardest part of making this list, which is why I want to talk about it so much. What makes a bad card, or a card that was never good, or didn't live up to its potential? What's the definition of that, right? I mean, we could go with cards that saw very sparing tournament play, but were never all-stars. We could go with cards that were like amazing on Arena, but never really saw tournament play at all, right? So what do we do here? Well, in the end, I decided to go with only the absolute most obscure cards that I still know some people in the comments section are going to have built decks with, that they played with for 6 months, and they love them so much, and my whole deck is based around number 6, you know? Like, I know I'm going to get those people, but I'm still going to say that we're going for only the most obscure cards that showed up in the fewest amount of decks and really had more potential than that. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to do this list the same way we did the last list. If you didn't see that, go check it out. Recommended a video. Again, I'm a YouTuber. Sorry, don't blame the scorpion when he stings you. That's what he does. But the way we did the last video is we waited until right before number 1 to do the honorable mentions. We're going to do something similar this time, and we're going to do honorable mentions and such before we get to the top 3. But that means that we got to go ahead and go into it here. So number 10, everybody, is Semester's End. Now again, I know there's like 4 of you out here who built the Semester's End deck, and you love it. It's awesome. It's like your favorite deck. I get that. But again, I think it only strengthens my argument that there's only a few of you out there who know how good this card actually is. I've built a few decks with Semester's End, and we who like it are definitely in the minority, but we are definitely right. This card is awesome, especially in the wake of a card like Yorion leaving Standard, right? I know that this isn't a 4/5 flying bodies. It doesn't have that going for it, but also, it's instant speed. It costs 1 less mana than Yorion, and even though it can't blink enchantments and stuff like that, it can blink creatures and even planeswalkers. That's neat, especially with some of the new planeswalkers we have in the format, like the Wandering Emperor, which is probably works at least somewhat well with, at least refreshes her loyalty if nothing else. But you can probably make some sweet plays off of this, right? Block all of your opponent's creatures, and then at instant speed, you can blink all of your guys. All your opponent's creatures are tapped, your guys don't take any combat damage, and then come back bigger, ready to crack back on your turn. That seems very, very good to me, but if you're just using it the way you use a Yorion, blinking like 3 or 4 dudes, getting some value back at the end of the turn, incredible. Like, Semester's End is a sweet card at instant speed that's basically protection against sweepers and leads to some wacky combat step situations. So I don't know why this card wasn't more popular. I think people just pretty much wrote off every rare in Strixhaven the moment that set came out, but try this card while you still can. It's awesome. But number 9, gonna get pretty spicy here. There were a number of Artifacts Matter cards that almost made the list, right? Like Ingenious Smith, I think, sees just slightly too much play on Arena to make this list. So this card has to be truly obscure. And it's not the Blackstaff of Waterdeep, although it could honestly occupy this slot along with Oswald Fiddlebender, who is the true number 9. Blackstaff just always seemed like it could be a decent card or part of a shell or whatever, but Oswald felt like the engine for a shell, and it just never really came about. It kind of turns out that outside of a format like Commander, and even in Commander, I would imagine some of the time, it's kind of hard to make your entire deck about, you know, every single turn I'm going to take the exact same action and ramp from a 1-cost artifact to eventually a 5-cost artifact. My opponents are not going to mess with that plan whatsoever. It just turns out they will. They're going to mess with that plan. They're going to kill Oswald. They're going to blow up an artifact, something, to keep you from getting the 6-mana artifact of your dreams that you wanted to eventually ramp into by tapping your 2-drop every turn and spending mana on it. Honestly, I thought this card looked really good, and there are formats, environments in which I still think this card could be very, very good. And honestly, I think that's in some other formats. People have had some fun with this card, but maybe Standard was just too small of a pool for the funniest name in Standard. Actually, I think Eliwick Tumblestrum is the funniest name in Standard, but this is number 2. Number 8 is, I believe, a former number 1 on one of my top 20 or 30 lists, whatever it was. My number 1 card in all of Strixhaven was Jazzy, or Yadzy? I'm pretty sure it's Jazzy in this case. So the lesson I guess I learned from this one is that 8 mana is too much, unless the name of the card is Ugin the Spirit Dragon, and it's probably fine. Or Magma Opus. Not all 8 mana cards are good. Jazzy, even though she has a built-in way of protecting herself by bouncing back to your hand for reasonably cheap, she has a second mode on the back half of her that's not the best ramp card in the world, but is a ramp card. At least there's that. And if you ever actually proc one of these ridiculous triggers on the card, you're getting like a lot of value. It's so much value. You play basically any card for 1 mana. Like, yeah, I definitely had pipe dreams this card was going to be incredible, and I still think that there are shells in which this card is reasonable. I just don't think we ever got to see those shells in Standard. In the end, this is one of the cards that I've probably eaten my words on the most in the last 5 years as a content creator. I really thought that Jazzy was going to be something, but in the end, Jazzy was badsy. I finally got to do that joke. It took me 2 years to realize Jazzy is in fact pretty badsy. But she doesn't have to be. Think of the value. Anyway, number 7. I'll just never get over it. At least Glorious Protector's not on this list. I've had some stinky number 1s. A couple of my lists recently. My list over the last few sets I think have been very good. But I went through a spell there where I don't know what I was doing. But anyway. Number 7 is Flame Skull. This card's good. I'm convinced this card is fine. It's also a flaming skull. It's pretty metal if you care about that, right? But still, this card, maybe it just fell victim to Spikefield Hazard, right? Maybe that's the whole problem with Flame Skull, but honestly, there's just no real mono red aggro deck for this to go in. Some of the mono red aggro decks that are getting built right now still don't play Flame Skulls, or maybe just better 3-drops. But honestly, a 3-1 flyer that either keeps coming back or gets card advantage, right? I think that that's probably good. I mean, I still think that that's probably good. There are just too many ways to exile it in this environment, whether it is Spikefield Hazard or Vanishing Verse or something. So, again, maybe that's the ultimate problem with Flame Skull, but even if we didn't have Spikefield or Vanishing Verse, I have a sinking feeling people still wouldn't play this card. I think that we all just kind of stopped trying to play Flame Skull a while back. I've got some money on the fact that this is probably one of the most forgotten cards on the list. I'm pretty sure I'll catch people in the comment section like, oh yeah, Flame Skull is a Magic card. So I know that this is not one you've thought about in a good long time, but I still think it had potential. But another red creature that just straight up creates card advantage that saw zero play whatsoever, and this one I think a lot of people were really excited about when we first saw it, is number 6, Conspiracy Theorist. I hope that YouTube doesn't pop me for saying those words. I don't know how YouTube works. I don't know what the problem was with this thing. Maybe it just didn't have enough things to discard profitably, although that's hard to believe in a format with big score and unexpected windfall and stuff. There's so many ways to profit off of discarding cards. Prismari Command is in the format. It's just, I could go on. There's a lot of things that people are using as reanimation fodder. I can't not say milkshake, can I? People are using a lot of different milkshakes to put creatures into their yard right now in Standard. And so you would think that this would be a decent 2-drop to get you some value, but no, people just haven't really tried Conspiracy Theorist in this environment too much. I wanted to do all kinds of tricks with discarding cards in this format. We just never got to do them. Was there support that was pulled? Was there support the whole time we just didn't know? It's always going to bug me that Conspiracy Theorist was never really a played card in Standard, because I'm pretty sure we had the tools to do it, we just never did it. But of course, that's just a theory. A Magic the Gathering theory. Number 5, everybody? is right in the middle of the list here, is In Search of Greatness, which is a card which never ended its journey. It never found, just like Bono, still hasn't found what it's looking for. I think this card is good, but every time I try to play with it, I'm swiftly proven incorrect. I have, for what it's worth, seen this card show up in exactly one 5-color enchantments list, but beyond that, I really don't see it show up anywhere ever. I think people tested the card when it first came out, and they were immediately like, okay, it's a 2-drop that if I don't play a 1-drop, it doesn't give me any value on turn 3. I have to wait until turn 4 to get any value, and I have to play a 3-drop in order to get any value whatsoever. That 3-drop has to survive. I could play a 1-drop and then get a free 2-drop on turn 3. How good is that, really? Especially considering when you build with this card, you want to curve all the way up to like 5 or 6 to make sure you get like a free 6-drop, like a free Titan of Industry. So you don't really have the slots to be playing 1-drops in your deck. There's a lot of push-pull to when you actually get down to building a deck with this card, but I still say that a free card every turn, even if you only get 1 or 2 free cards in a game, is good Magic. And even when you're on the play, you have to have like the perfect opening hand to actually take advantage of the card. But you see, now I'm telling you why the card was bad, rather than telling you why it should have been good, which is the video concept. Now, why it should have been good: free stuff. Typically in Magic, free stuff is very, very good, and I think a lot of us had giant eyes for this card, thinking it was the next Fires of Invention. It's not. It was never going to be Fires of Invention, but it could have been something. Now, number 4 is a card that, in a world where 3-mana Planeswalkers are highly valued, probably should have seen some play. I mean, Obnixilis sees a little bit of play. He's probably going to be way better after rotation, right? And there are some 3-mana Planeswalkers didn't see any play. You know, Nico Aris probably saw too much play on Arena and like blue-white control lists that people tried to make work to make this list. And Kasmina Enigma Sage, not a good card. It's probably not a very good Magic card whatsoever, but I think a card that's a 3-mana Planeswalker and is right in the sweet spot between too bad of a card to make the list and the card was too played to make the list, is probably Rowan. Now, keep in mind there's a whole other Planeswalker on the backside of this, but I'm mostly in concern that a 3-mana Planeswalker like this didn't see any play whatsoever. I mean, maybe that's because you really want to play it in a deck full of instants and sorceries, so you're probably not playing too many creatures on turn 1 and 2. There's nothing to protect it by the time it comes down, but hopefully, since you're playing a lot of instants and sorceries, you got removal, you can blow away any creatures that would attack into it, right? But it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't line up that cleanly. But I still think Rowan is kind of neat. You know, a point of damage to your opponent every turn. Stuff you cast costs less to play, which is typically very, very good on just about any Magic card. So there's that. But also the ultimate isn't half bad either and can actually win games by itself. So again, not even getting into the Planeswalker on the other side of this card, which is sometimes pretty decent too. Just the 3-mana version of this card. Probably should have seen a little bit of, just a little bit, right? But I just barely ever, even if ever, I think I played against Rowan like twice the whole 2 years she was in Standard. And that's a real shame, because whether you're playing the 3-mana or the 5-mana version, this is a serviceable Planeswalker. But let's move on, not quite to the top 3. If you remember this far back, at the beginning of the video, I have trouble with that sometimes. I talked about doing the honorable mentions before we got to the top 3. That's what we're going to do right now. But we're going to do things, again, we're going to keep it fresh, baby. We're going to do things a little bit differently. I have not just an honorable mention, but I've also got a few cards I want to talk about that just, and I mean just barely, saw what I believe is slightly too much play on Arena, at least, to have made this list, but I still want to bring them up. I'm going to run through those really quick. They're here on my phone, so I'm getting my YouTuber. A big one is the Demi-Lich. Now, both this and another card, I think, saw a little bit too much play in Standard 2022. It was in a deck that 5-0'd a Standard League one time on MTGO. So, like, Demi-Lich, it was here and there, but never really where it needed to be, which is on top of Standard Sun, because Demi-Lich just looks like a ridiculous Magic card. And it had a couple of shots at the ring, but never quite got to put on the belt. But aside from that, Ebon Death. This is another one. It shows up in occasional mono black lists on Arena, but not all of the Blood on the Snow lists anymore, right? But occasionally we'll see this in like mono black aggro lists when those pop up every once in a blue moon, every once in a bad moon, old school Magic players. But anyway, Ebon Death did not see the amount of play that I really expected it to see, and still think that it could. A 5/2 flyer that comes back it's a good Magic card, but again, Vanishing Verse and just. What a stupid format. Mavinda is the next one I want to talk about. It's not the next Feather. It's been a couple of years now. I think we can all agree it's not Feather, but still a good card. Still good. Why didn't this see play? It's a good Magic card. Another one is Harness Infinity. I got 5 of these, by the way. We're on number 4. Harness Infinity saw a little bit of play in Standard 2022 as well. And it was sometimes seen very sparingly at the beginning of the days of Sultai Ultimatum, but it quickly left the list. But it did show up from time to time. I mean, for like 2 weeks, and then it was gone. But it has shown up extremely sparingly in a list or two from time to time, so it can't quite make the list, but I will still say it didn't see as much play as it should have. And it's just powerful. Look at the text box on the spell. I don't care how much it costs. Look at the text box on the stupid spell. But aside from that, the last card in this category that I want to talk about is Pyre of Heroes. It's like a birthing pod. This probably saw too much play in Clerics. This is a key card in Black-White Clerics. And if you haven't played against that deck enough on Arena, Clerics has actually remained, like, kind of strong. It was super important in that deck and did all of the work in the world. Just check the comments section. Clerics players will let you know just how much work this card does. So I just couldn't put it on the list, but this was a card that didn't do half of the labor that I thought it would do in Standard, to say the least. But my actual honorable mention, now that we're through all of that, I was hoping that would take like 30 seconds to like 3 minutes. But now that we're done with all of that, my actual honorable mention is Kosema. I just love Kosema. And I had a lot of different cards I want to put on this list, guys. It was almost like a top 25. And let me know in the comments section what cards should have been on this list that I didn't put on the list. Because again, whether it was, Venerable Warsinger or Dream Devourer, there are so many cards that I wanted to put on this list, and I kind of had to whittle it down to 10. But in the end, Kosema's just kind of a personal favorite of mine. I think the Omen Keel is actually like very decent. It's a very easily crewable 2-mana 3/3 to get you card advantage in the form of lands, and it turns out you need those. Kosema herself is a 3-mana 2/4, not the worst stats in the world naturally. She blocks well the first turn she's out, and then she draws you like 3 or 4 cards when she comes back to play. It's really good. Like, Kosema is a sweet little thing that has a lot of different playability, has a couple of different spots early on the curve, and that can matter depending on what kind of deck you're playing. Get your lands, get your cards, in your like control deck. It's an interesting one of almost like pseudo finisher. You swept the board state last turn, suddenly you've got a relatively decently sized creature coming back and a fresh hand. Like, why didn't Kosema do literally anything? This is such a sweet Magic card. But I guess I could say that about pretty much every card on the list. Like, honestly, this list is in almost no particular order. There's just a bunch of cards that I really thought should have been good, but I feel like the top 3 has a little bit of separation. These are cards that almost certainly should have, in a different format, been real contenders, and just never were. And number 3 is Yorn, God of Winter, who's very close to my number 1 in the set that he came out in. I think I had to restrain myself from making Yorn number 1. This card is so ridiculous, man. Like, a 3-mana 3/3 isn't what it used to be, but when you actually look at the text box on the card, untapping all your lands is stupid. That's a very powerful thing to be able to do. You know what else is powerful? Bringing back a thing from your graveyard every turn, which is what the other half of the card does. This card is bonkers. Like, I don't understand. Was it just not a good enough Sultai deck? Oh yeah, there was a ridiculous Sultai deck. It was the best deck in the format for months while this card was in play. Well, after this card came out. The best deck, by the way, I'm talking about Emergent Ultimatum. Sultai Ultimatum. So there was a really powerful Sultai deck. This card just couldn't find its way into, it just wasn't a snow deck, whatever. So I get the reasons the card didn't show up when it should have, but just a card that untaps all your lands on the front half and is a reanimator stick, or at least, get a card back stick once a turn on the back half. It's just, the card is banana pudding. I really don't understand. I've been able to give fairly concrete reasons for why a lot of these cards didn't see play, but when it comes to Yorn, I think we should have tried a little harder. Number 2 is a card that, look, I know has its fans. I see you out there asking me why I didn't play this card in this deck or that deck. I know that there are people who love Westgate Regent, but it still didn't see enough play on Arena. I have basically never played against this card, or really only once or twice have I ever actually played against a Westgate Regent on the other side of the table. And I know some of you love it, but I rarely encounter this card, so I have to put it on my list. Look how ridiculously powerful it looks. Anyone who's ever played with a Westgate Regent will tell you that if this thing gets like 1 turn to swing free, it's really impossible to deal with, right? Once it becomes like an 8/8, and suddenly your opponent's they're just not gonna have a good time. They must kill the card. To kill the card takes multiple cards. It's just, you're having the time of your life. Westgate Regent, I know it might sound like the name of a hotel, but that's because this card is 5 stars. It's the last time I'll ever get to do that joke. It's kind of sad. But number 1 is another black creature, actually, because there are a few creatures in black that just broke my heart over the last couple of years, and I can't get over it. I will, again, be put into my grave wondering why. Still, with what little brainwaves I have left that are active at that point, there won't be any. But let's just say there are some for the sake of argument. They'll be wondering why Gelatinous Cube didn't work. We finally got a Gelatinous Cube card, and I was really excited for it, especially when I considered it a potential replacement for Ravenous Chupacabra. Ravenous Chupacabra was a very good boy. It was the best boy. This is not... I was really thinking that this was just going to be like, oh, it's a Brutal Cathar, right? It's like a Fiend Hunter type card, but it costs 1 more mana. But it can eat the creature, so that makes up for it. Apparently it doesn't. Brutal Cathar is one of the most played creatures in Standard right now in a variety of decks. Mono White, Boros, Naya Werewolves, and stuff like that. This Gelatinous Cube Sauce 0, it just didn't see play. It's just bad. It's a bad card, man. Which is sad. That's really sad because it's good. This is to serve us. This is to serve, I should say, to teach us the difference that 1 mana can make, and also castability, right? Like you can splash Brutal Cathar into like a 3-color pile. It's a lot harder to do that with the Gelatinous Cube, and I do think that made the cards kind of suffer. At least the card's playability. So there are a lot of reasons why it probably didn't see play, but again, this is one of those cards that if they spoil it, even in this case, knowing Gelatinous Cube exists, if they were to spoil this card again in like Dominaria United or the Brothers War or something, that would be really off flavor, and I would probably have an issue with that. But I would also immediately be like, hey, Gelatinous Cube's back. It's going to be good this time. I'm fooled. Hey guys, it's going to be awesome now. We're in the right format for Gelatinous Cube. I just really wanted this card to work, and I still want this card to work. A 4-mana 4/3 that eats a thing when it comes into play really ought to be a playable Magic card, and it just never was. But that's my list. I probably talked way too long about Gelatinous Cube. I really wanted it to be something, you know? I lost a lot of money on that horse. But in any case, that's all I got for this one. But like I said, this could have been like a top 50. When I sat down to write this list, I started getting scared. Because like, oh, this is going to be too many cards to talk about. So I had to cut a lot from this, and I've already mentioned a couple of the cuts that I made, but there's way more than that. Like Asmodeus the Archfiend, he's half Gristlebrand, half Necropotence. We didn't play with this card. I mean, he's a 6-mana with no keyword abilities and no way to protect himself. There are reasons we didn't play the card, but still. Gristlebrand, Necropotence, didn't see any play. Just let me know, though. It's your turn. Let me know what cards I should have talked about, or you expected me to talk about and weren't on the list, and that disappointed you. I'm into it. Let me know. Aside from all that, I guess I'm pretty much done here, and I need to start editing, which is not the funnest part of my job, but I got to do it, right? That's how I get it to the people, so you can watch it. So I guess let me get started with that. And I'll give you a premature thank you for liking, subscribing, clicking the bell, and doing all that YouTube stuff. And if you want, of course, you can support me on Patreon. It's just $1 a month to not only vote on content, but now you get outtakes from the videos every now and again. We just put up outtakes from one of the last videos that we did. I think the Conspiracy, My Wildest Theories video. If you haven't seen that one, that's a good one too. I'm still a YouTuber, guys. I'm sorry. But if we put up outtakes on Patreon from that video, if you're into that, just throw $1 a month my way. You get outtakes from videos from here on out. But aside from that, you want to see me play some Magic? I do so on Twitch. Not very well most of the time, but sometimes it can be entertaining. Twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. Link in the description. It's free to follow on Twitch, so help me out over there. But aside from that, I think there's nothing else. So just hit me up in the comment section. Let me know how you felt about all the goings on today. And I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.